Hey guys, Nathan here with another Q&A where we're answering your questions about the Bible, the church, or anything else that you want to know. And today's question is, how should I talk with a Christian who thinks I'm doing wrong? And this question fits really well in with our last couple of weeks, where 2 weeks ago we covered how should I talk to a Christian who I think is doing wrong? And then last week we discussed the question, how should I talk to a non-Christian who I think is doing wrong? So now we're reversing the field. We're not talking about something they did wrong. They're talking about something that we did wrong. And one thing about this question is that the relationship isn't defined. And relationship is a huge factor when we're talking about a question like this. For example, children, they're supposed to be under the guidance of their parents. Ephesians 6:1 says it this way: Children, obey your parents, because you belong to the Lord, for this is the right thing to do. Similarly, spouses, they're charged to help lift each other up and encourage each other to follow God, as Ecclesiastes 4 says, that two people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. And if one person fails, the other can reach out. They can help the other one up. But someone who falls alone, they're in real trouble. Even friends are called to encourage each other to be their best. Proverbs 27, as iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. And that's a good place for us to start. To remember that there are certain relationships that we need to respect as an authority to speak into our lives. And God has placed them there to enhance our Christian walks and to draw us closer to God. Now further, we're going to live under the assumption that the person in today's question, they are not trying to guilt or shame you. They're there completely humble. They just want to help. And helping is giving aid, assistance, or support. And the thing is, if they're not doing this in a humble way, then we need to point them back to our question from a couple of weeks ago of how do I talk to a Christian who I think is doing wrong? In that, we discuss how not to bully, how not to judge other Christians when we talk with them. But if they're wanting to help, then we need to be able to hear them out. We need to be able to respect what they're saying. And this is where the second vague portion of this question comes in. Because the question says, how should I talk with a Christian who thinks that I'm doing wrong? The specifics of what exactly the wrong is here are unclear. So first, let's go ahead and approach this from the direction of you actually did something wrong. So this week, your friend comes up to you and they're like, hey, I saw you cussing out a neighbor this last week. And there might be a ton of reasons as to why you cussed out your neighbor. But in the end, it was the wrong thing to do. So them talking to you about it is the correct thing to do because you did something wrong. Which means, how do we talk to our friend about this issue? Well, first, you want to hear them out. Proverbs 19:20 says it this way, that we need to get all the advice and all the instruction that we can so that we will be wise for the rest of our lives. Which means we need to make sure that we listen to all that they have to say. Ask any questions that we need clarification on. Okay, well, what exactly did you see? Well, why do you think that's wrong? And do not take a defensive posture. Know that they are there to help you. And it's probably as hard for them to talk to you about it as it is for you to listen to what they have to say. And that'll bring us to our second step. You need to fess up and take time to pray together. James 5:16 says it this way, that you confess your sins to each other, that we pray for each other, that we may be healed. The earnest prayer of a righteous person, it has great power, and it is always going to produce wonderful results. So tell them what you did. And if you want, tell them why you did it. Not as an excuse, but more as an explanation to help them understand why you behaved the way that you did. And then take that time and pray together. And that'll bring you to the third step. Tell them what you have done about it or what you plan to do about it. And maybe you felt horrible about cussing out your neighbor after the fact. And so you went over immediately and you apologized to him. Maybe you've been working through a Bible study on anger, or you're seeing a counselor. Let that person know. Let that person realize that you have seen the issue in your life and you are working on it. But maybe you haven't done anything yet. Perhaps you didn't even know that you had done something wrong. And if that's the case, now that you realize your mistake, now that your mistake has been brought to light, tell them what steps you plan on doing to correct the wrong that you've committed. And that'll bring us to our last step, which is to take time to thank them. Proverbs 25:12 says it this way: to anyone who listens, valid criticism, it's like a gold earring, or it's like other gold jewelry. So thank them for being bold and coming to you, because their concern will have made you a better person in the end. And it is not easy for people to approach other people who are sinning, no matter how close you are to them. I mean, really, a lot of times it's easier just to kind of turn your head and just pretend like it didn't happen and let it slide. So thank them for taking the time, being bold, and helping you become more like Christ in your walk. Okay, that's how to handle it if someone comes and talks to you and you realize, man, what I did was wrong. But the conversation becomes a lot tougher if you don't think what you did was wrong. And I'll give you an example of this. And it's from my days in Texas, that almost all of our Christian friends homeschooled. And there was a lot of low-level guilting and bullying public school parents into doing what's best for their children. And oddly enough, I was in a meeting in Michigan where a Christian actually said, well, I'd never hire someone who homeschools for this job. And the other Christians in the room agreed. So there you go. It's a position that a lot of people have very different opinions about, but very strong opinions about. Which begs the question, how should I talk with a Christian who thinks I'm doing wrong? And in this case, it's not right or wrong. It's a case where the Christian thinks that you're doing wrong. But it turns out that it's an opinion, which brings us back to our sermon from a few weeks ago on knowing truth from opinion. Because homeschool or public school or private school, they're not black and white issues. It's in the middle. It's a gray matter. So if a fellow Christian approaches you and you feel it's a matter of opinion, at least the first step is still the same. That you need to hear them out. That you need to make sure to listen to all that they have to say. And again, ask questions that you need clarification on. And if you start realizing that this is a matter of opinion, tell them that you need more help understanding what they're saying. And ask them to walk through some scriptures that would help you understand the point of where they're coming from. Because as Psalms 119 says, your word, it's a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. And if it's a matter of opinion, there won't be much spiritual backing, which will help the discussion move from this is a biblically right and wrong thing to do to this is their opinion of what is the right and wrong thing to do. And that will help us in our second step, because our second step is where things get a lot trickier. Because you need to voice your heart in the matter. You need to humbly tell them why you made the choice that you did. And if you have scriptures, feel free to bring those. If you've prayed about it, make sure to let them know that. And this is going to be particularly difficult because you already know that the person disagrees with your choices. Again, we got to remember, we cannot get defensive. But you also don't have to assume that you need to win them over to your side. Just explain your thoughts on the matter, and hopefully it'll help them understand your position, and it'll diffuse a potential tense situation. Now, if the person can't accept that you didn't change your mind and they have to have their way, then it becomes a circumstance of bullying or judging. And ultimately, they have to remember that they are not in control of your life. But you also have to remember that you shouldn't be in control of your life either. That God is in control of our lives as Christians. So tell them you do respect their thoughts. But as it's not a biblical matter, as we discussed in the first step, you need to seek God for the direction that He has in your life. And that'll bring you to your final step, to pray together. Matthew 18:20, for where 2 or 3 are gathered together as my followers, I'm there among them. So again, thank them for bringing up the matter and take time to pray together for wisdom. And tell them that you will take time, that you're going to pray more about it. And don't just do lip service. Genuinely pray more about it, because it never hurts to give something a little bit more prayer. And that's it. Again, both sides should be respectful. As James 1 says, that we all need to remember to be quick to listen and slow to speak and slow to get angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness God desires. And 2 Corinthians says, whether we are here in this body or away from this body, our ultimate goal as Christians is to please God. And I completely get that when you're approached, whether you actually did wrong or they just think you did wrong, it can be shocking, it can be embarrassing, and it can be hurtful. But don't lash out. Be quick to listen. Be slow to speak. Process the words that they're saying. And that conversation, it's probably not going to be easy to hear. It may not be easy to accept. In reality, it may even be flat out inaccurate. But if that uncomfortable conversation can help you grow closer to God, then it was worth it.